Thank you, Asmita. And I welcome all the panelists for this very important issue, gender and health. So there is enormous amount of literature on this particular issue. If at all there is, any amount of research done on women's issues, it is mostly on health. So we have a distinguished panel with us. I would like all of you to, strictly stick to the time. How much time you are giving to each person?
So we need to end this session by 3:05. That's what Kumar has told us.
Okay.
So and then I would also like to have some interaction with the audience.
Okay.
So maybe 5 minutes for questions. So let us target to end this by 3, and then as the questions are directed.
Okay. So how are you actually structuring it? Like, it's like global health issues or, gender and health can be anything under the world.
Yeah.
So what kind
So-
of spectrum, what kind of issues we are discussing here?
So it's
Bihar
basically
related or India related or focusing Bihar in the picture, we are talking about global issues, how you are actually structuring it?
So basically, the questions are structured according to the core area of work of our panelists. So
Okay.
they range from a lot of issues which are India specific, and also global, like relationship between women empowerment and child health and nutrition, and then issues of urbanization and other things. And then there are specific questions related to COVID, how COVID has affected various things, and so on. So that's why I would start this with Dr. Nandita Bhan. And the first question that I would like to address to her is, with growing urbanization and increasing migrations, how do you think that the healthcare system, both rural and urban, are prepared to for this transition? And what are the measures that are needed to address this?
Thank you, everyone. So I think the question is about, are we prepared to take on the next big challenge? And the answer to that is, perhaps we are not fully prepared, but we have the capacity to do so. And I say this with the understanding that the recent NFHS, particularly for Bihar, has thrown a very mixed picture about our progress as well as, our achievements. So Bihar has, for instance, done pretty well on a number of health service indicators. It's done well on ANC1, it's done well on family planning indicators, including modern contraceptive use. It's done very well. I mean, TFR has been reducing, and it's done moderately well on other indicators like postnatal care and stillbirth assistance. So it's a mixed story, and what it really reveals is that there is capacity to progress and to provide the health care that both rural and urban populations need. What we are lagging behind in Bihar, I feel, as also the NFHS shows, that there's been a little bit of stagnation on the social side. And I say this because I work in gender and health, and I don't necessarily see gender and health as different fields. I don't see them as siloed, and I feel like we can't make progress on health if we don't systematically invest in gender. So I think the three areas, because I think the question that you had posed was like, and also the session in the morning has largely been about how do we move forward. So I feel like the three areas where I think we have to invest more is one, as ma'am in the morning had talked about, adolescence, particularly higher education, child marriage, the areas that are critical to adolescent girls particularly. And they have, as we all know, I think many people in this room know pretty well, that they have life course and lifelong influences. So the first one would be adolescence, particularly higher education, marriage, and so on. The second one would be nutrition. I think one of the other panelists will talk about in greater detail, but some of our indicators for Bihar and also for the rest of India show that we have not only stagnated but we have worsened. COVID may also be a reason that has perhaps set us back. So I think nutrition would be the second area. And the third area, which I guess again another panelist will talk about in much more detail, is violence against women and girls. And we also do a lot of work on violence ourselves, and we know that violence itself has a number of consequences, both for physical well-being, mental well-being, and so on. So I want to say that. I think in terms of also one issue that I want to point out is that despite the progress and despite our capacity, the next big challenge, I think, for health and health systems will be ensuring quality. Because it is one thing to reach someone, but I think NFHS data and other indicators point out that we often reach people, but when we lose them. So for example, NFHS shows that ANC1 is very high, but full ANC has not moved. That means somewhere where our health workers, our community health workers are reaching out to women, but somehow our health system is not able to ensure a certain amount of quality or trust in the health system. And trust is very important. So I think that will be one critical issue that we have to tackle going forward. The second one will also be on the gender side, will be to gain a deeper understanding of what it is that women want. Particularly, why do women not use healthcare? Or why do women use the healthcare that they do? Why do they make certain choices? And I think one of the issues here will be not only to have an in-depth understanding of women themselves, but to have an understanding of the different stakeholders. So I just want to leave with those thoughts because I think a lot of other panelists will come to these issues more.
Thanks, Nandita, for setting the tone of the discussion. So let me just go to Dr. Shashwata Ghosh. Dr. Ghosh, please talk about this linkage between empowering women and what benefits are there for child health and nutrition. So overall, we know from evidence that empowering women does improve health outcomes of children. This is this evidence is there worldwide, but what does the Indian experience say? And also, I would like to just make a small note here that empowerment of women can mean different things. Like we spoke in the earlier panel, it could mean more work, it could mean giving them cash transfers and so on. So what kind of empowerment is beneficial? And is it that in some ways that there are forms of empowerment which we think are empowering, but actually that is not beneficial? So it would be nice if you just elaborate a little.
So, thank you, Usmita and IGC for organizing this. Now the empowerment, as you have rightly pointed out, that empowerment itself is a very deep kind of concept. If we go back to Naila Kabir and Sunita Kishore's papers and all these things, we will find there are three different issues what actually they have talked about. Earlier it was actually discussed by Professor Sen and Batliwala in 2012. Now, empowerment in that sense that I actually have three separate indicators. One indicator is the evidences, another is the sources, and another is the setting. So, evidence could be your decision-making power, your freedom of movement, and all these things, while the sources could be your education, your workability, while the setting is your actually more familial and more environmental related things like your type of households and all these things. Now, all these things have separate kind of effect on child health and nutrition, like say, studies have shown that the mother's education, health and other related empowerment indicators are significant determinants of the child health and nutritional status. Our now comes to the point of how to actually measure it from these quantitative data sets. Now say National Family Health Survey rounds, you have this this type of data set like your freedom of movement, your decision making power in the household, your decision making power regarding your own health, but they don't actually take into account the very important indicator like political participation, like community participation. I mean the political participation means how the Gram Sabha meetings, how much, whether do you attend those kinds of meetings, do you actually raise questions or something like that, which are very significant actually particularly in the rural underdeveloped villages particularly in case of Bihar. Now, for that reason, empowerment indicators in this National Family Health Survey as well as other actually large-scale data surveys are to some extent it may be misleading as well. Now, according to our research, what we have actually found that the maternal endowments, which actually incorporates the empowerment as well. Now, those variables like maternal educational attainment, work status, age at first birth, institutional delivery, body mass index, height, anemia, other empowerment indicators as I have already pointed out, and having bank account and having mobile phone, they have very significant influence in determining the childhood stunting in all India level from NFHS 3 and NFHS 4, these two rounds if we actually compare. And more importantly, it has a very severe implication according to the quantile of the child nutritional status. For example, at the poorest quantile, those who are at the 10% level of their stunting status, there the maternal related endowments contributes nearly 50%, while at the 75% quantile it is nearly 84%. So it actually varies across the quantile of the child nutritional status. At the same time, the returns to the maternal endowments have also tried to actually reduce such kind of disparities, particularly at 25th and 50th quantile. So the BMI, dietary practice and education are most important maternal endowments compared to the other actually maternal endowments. Now, it is already have said, many of the panelists have already actually pointed out in the last session as well. I just want to go beyond this this particular maternal nutrition status, that we generally governmental programs as well as other development agencies are focused on the immediate child level interventions, particularly on ICDS, whether the minimum dietary diversity are actually there or not, or all those kind of things. But according to me, it is, we actually need to go beyond that. It is not like only taking that minimum dietary diversity and ICDS and all these things into the domain of nutrition, but much more than that. I will stop here and then.
Yeah.
Let me put this in context, otherwise we'll be going round and round.
Take this mic. Take this.
Okay. Yeah, let me actually put this in context, because we are trying to understand gender and health issues in the context of, because we are all sitting here and discussing. So we are much more interested in what is happening in Bihar and things like that. So if you actually compare, this is for all the panelists, because you are coming with a lot of experience working in various organizations and coming up with that kind of evidence where you are working. So the issue is here Bihar has really done well in so many indicators. If you compare NFHS 4 and NFHS 5, there is a tremendous improvement in terms of certain indicators. But only in nutrition related indicators we are going down. So the mothers who had at least 4 antenatal care visits, it has increased tremendously from 14.4% to 52.2%. And mothers who had antenatal checkup in the first trimester, also there is a lot of tremendous improvement. Yeah, so 34.6 to 52.9. It's a very, very marginal improvement in terms of infant mortality rate, which has come down from 48 to 46, and under 5 mortality rate, which has come down from 58 to 56. And also the total fertility rate is still work in progress, which has come down from 3.4 to 3%. Of course, the child marriage campaign we have run only for 1.5 years. It is now not being run with full vigor. So even that has come down from 42.5 to 40.8% with only a little focus for 1.5 years. So this is the kind of scenario where you see a lot of improvements. But in terms of the anemia status, it has really increased, and these indicators, this doesn't look very encouraging. So the anemia percentage has gone up from girls 15 to 19 years, from 61 to 65. And for 15 to 49 year age women, it has gone from 60 to 63.5%. So given this kind of a scenario, with your experience working in the field since so many years, what is it that works, especially while working, if you have any, case study done, or research findings, or you kind of, you got any evidence? For example, like Irina is also sitting here, they have done such a wonderful work in Jivika. The PCI has supported, improving dietary diversity and other issues. Maybe she can also throw some light on that. So if you have that kind of very strong evidence, which you can actually bring to the table and tell the people, look, here this has worked, so we can actually implement it this way. So if you have that kind of evidence or that kind of experience, that would be much more interesting, because everybody knows what is there, what are the issues, what are the problems, everybody knows. How do we improve it? If we can deliberate on that particular issue, it would be very much useful for everyone.
Thanks, ma'am, for this wonderful input. I think that is why sessions like this are important, where we get to know from you and others, policymakers who are at the helm of policy making, that what exactly are the kind of evidence that is important, which comes from the ground. So like this issue of anemia that you mentioned is a very important area that needs to be worked on, and there is some very astonishing data that I found, that some of the private practitioners in medical hospitals in Bihar mention that majority of the women patients that come to them have in general on average a hemoglobin level 4. And so this was in context of some personal, like when I went with my father for a checkup, and he was saying for Bihar anemia levels, that is the level of anemia in Bihar, and it's common. And I was like, you knew this kind of evidence, then that should go into research. There should be more research about this. What is it? Like is it the food, or is it like genetics or something else? So these are definitely very useful research agendas, and we'll take note of it, and maybe our research experience would come in to design and address these kinds of studies. So moving on to Ms. Nafisa Shafiq. So as you know, this imminent health problem of COVID struck us, and there were a lot of restructuring in the health system which were done in the short run as well as long run. So what do you think, how has it affected the health systems in general? What are your views on that?
Thank you so much, Oshmita, and good afternoon, colleagues. I mean, it's not the rule of the panel, but if you allow me, Chair, I would like to show a video, very short video to everyone. So may I request to play that video before I start speaking? Thank you. going back to your question, Ashmita, about COVID and the implication or impacts on health system, I think what Madam Chair was mentioning, these data are all pre-COVID data. And we don't know what's happening specifically in the context of Bihar. When it comes to nutrition, ANC, immunization, we are not sure what is happening there because the data is still not out. Now, it definitely posed a lot of, a lot of challenges. Sorry? No.
Yeah. Structuring during COVID times affect the health system. That was the question.
So what we know that, the entire health system was kind of repositioned because to, cater the need of COVID-19, and also a lot of services could not be delivered to women and children and adolescents on the ground. So definitely there was a gap. But then COVID also brought a beautiful opportunity for us. The opportunity is we then started to explore the digital platforms. We started to do much more sectoral programming as the video was actually calling for. So all the sectors came together, and I think the COVID, posed a challenge on the system to step up. Without COVID, I don't think that we would have ever thought of, different innovative approaches. So I think that that's really one of the best thing out of COVID situation. But then, of course, the situation got very stretched. Now, my point here is one thing that we have not really focused much on before or pre-COVID is the mental health issue, where girls and women, they have been affected so badly in terms of gender-based violence, domestic violence, and we were not ready to cater the need or the call for that. So going forward, what could be done in terms of policies and programs? I think the most important thing that we can do is consider a whole cadre who can really support the mental health issues, number one. And number two, multisectoral interventions where we can have a very robust referral pathway which will be connecting the dots of different sectors. I think that's very important. And the third thing that I would really mention here is actively engaging in the community engagement component, which is also COVID relevant, which we have not thought of before. But now, not only risk communication, we know that, people are really not wearing masks or not adhering to the COVID appropriate behaviors. Sorry, I was not actually mentioning that, but then good that you picked up your mask. So that is another issue that we need to really continue. Some of the behaviors which were not part of the mainstream health interventions, like hand washing, came out as a very strong behavior cross-sectorally. So the last thing I would like to mention here is also in the system going forward, how we can engage men and boys when it comes to not only mental health issues, but also neonatal health, maternal health, adolescent health. So men and boys engagement. We don't even have a cadre frontline workers who can reach men and boys. 100% of our frontline workers are female, and they might not have that negotiation power to reach men and boys. So in short, I would really think that multisectoral approach, really focusing on mental health issues and having cadre at every level, not only at the state level, but up to the panchayat level, because that's the need of the hour. And the third is men and boys engagement.
Thank you, Nafisa. I think the multisectoral approach that you mentioned is very, very important, and that brings me to Dr. Padma Deostali, and I would like to ask you, how do you think the health systems are prepared to handle situations related to issues like domestic violence, like she was talking about mental health and other issues. So I think this is very closely related to aspects of domestic violence as well, where it does not only so where you are not only treating for the wound, but also much deeper than that. So what do you have to say about some of the successful interventions in India?
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me and giving us this opportunity to share. And I'm going to speak taking off from what you said about what works, what's the evidence, global and national. And within that, I would say that when it comes to violence against women, we have to understand that violence affects physical and mental health. So it has direct implications, it has long-term implications on physical health. So it could be genital physical injuries, sexual reproductive health problems, it could be mental health issues. A lot of women may approach the health system for treatment, but may not report domestic violence. So they'll just come in, get treatment and go. And way back in 2000, this work with health system for the first time in India was carried out in Mumbai through the Dilasa project, which started as an experiment. And since then, it has been replicated in several states. And recently, 2020, Routledge published a book where we've actually put all these different approaches and models together as a book. 3 distinct models, health sector models that emerge, which have worked in responding to violence against women. One is institutionalized health systems responses. These are existing in Mumbai in 13 hospitals, in Kerala, all district hospitals of Kerala, Haryana, 14 district hospitals, Goa, district hospitals, Meghalaya, and now Karnataka today has started, inaugurated in 5 hospitals in Bangalore. So secondary hospitals or district hospitals which have a certain number of women coming in, there's a certain workload, their setting up crisis intervention departments has shown to work. It has demonstrated that annually, each of these hospitals have received on an average 200 new women reporting domestic violence or sexual violence. And these are women. No, I'm talking about health. This is part of National Health Mission, madam. These are not one-stop centers. These are integrated departments of public hospitals. And there are 2 different pathways for women to come there. One is women who are coming for immediate injuries. Often, hospitals will only do the medico-legal cursory documentation, not even follow the law. Not only in Bihar, in many other states across India. That is the problem, because there are no guidelines for responding to domestic violence from the ministry. The ministry has issued guidelines for responding to sexual violence, which are not being followed. And a lot of harmful practices continue. So one is this institutionalized health system response, which we see has worked very well. 200 new women receiving care for domestic violence is a good number from any perspective, because these are women who may or may not show up in your police records, because they may not file a case. But they have come in here, they have sought support, and it will help them. Whatever counseling they receive helps them, empowers them to stop recurrence of violence and mitigate the health impact, the effect of whatever is happening to them. The second model that we found was civil society organizations working with health systems, engaging them to respond. Training providers, setting up centers, running the counseling services themselves. This is different from the institutional response, where the National Health Mission has hired counselors and is running the entire department under the health budget. Third is community-led initiatives, where they have set up health clinics in rural areas, in villages, and these health clinics are actually engaging on the issue of violence against women and providing support. So I think this evidence speaks for itself. And coming to Bihar, no, these are all run by the hospitals. And coming to Bihar, I'll end the model with, and based on this evidence, Care India has begun work with the Department of Health, and in Vaishali districts in 4 health facilities, there's a pilot project called Saja, which is trying to engage health systems to sensitively respond to violence against women. And madam, you'll be, we started in October, and within 3 months, this is of course before COVID, within 3 months we had 100 survivors reporting across these 4 facilities. And when you look at the spectrum of violence, and we all know that the NFHS gives us a X figure, which is much higher than what you find in the NCRB, because very few women actually go through the criminal justice system and register complaints. But what you have from the health are really women who are being identified early on before they reach severe levels of abuse, where they are pushed out, thrown out, or they have to actually register a police complaint. So in that sense, from a public health perspective, having health systems respond really works well in identifying women at an early stage.
Thank you, Padma. So let me go on to Mr. Vikas Nath and ask him about his experience in working in community mobilization of women's groups, home visits and counseling efforts, and how do you think that has benefited in improving the health outcome?
Thank you, Asmita. If chair allow, I would like to continue in Hindi. It's okay, ma'am, if I would continue in Hindi. Thank you. Because I would like to connect with the participants also. So, मैं अपनी बात की शुरुआत करूँगा आज के इनॉग्रल सेशन में, जब मिस्टर अमीर सुरबानी जी ने कहा था कि कोई भी प्रोग्राम ऐसा हो जिसमें वुमेन को ये मौका मिले कि वो डिज़ाइन करे, इम्प्लीमेंट करे और खुद इवेलुएट करे. सो एकजुट का अभी तक का जो अनुभव रहा है, देयर इज अ अप्रोच कॉल्ड PLA, पार्टिसिपेटरी लर्निंग एंड एक्शन, जिसके कोर में ये बात है कि किसी भी थीम पे, चाहे वो हेल्थ हो, न्यूट्रिशन हो, वायलेंस अगेंस्ट वुमेन हो या एडोलेसेंट रिलेटेड कोई भी काम हो, जब वो जाए तो कम्युनिटी कोर में हो, वो उस प्रोग्राम को, वो अपने प्रॉब्लम को आइडेंटिफाई करे, उसको प्रायोरिटाइज करे, उसके रिलेटेड सॉल्यूशंस पे बात करे, उनको प्रायोरिटाइज करे और उनको इम्प्लीमेंट करे, और फिर खुद उसको इवैल्यूएट करे कि कितने हद तक उन्होंने अपने प्रायोरिटीज़ को अचीव किया है. लगभग 2 डेकेड से एकजुट वुमेन्स ग्रुप के साथ काम कर रहा है, और जैसा कि मैम बोल रही थी कि क्या बेस्ट प्रैक्टिसेस हैं न्यूट्रिशन रिलेटेड या हेल्थ रिलेटेड जो दूसरी जगह पे अचीव किए जा सकते हैं, तो मैं शेयर करना चाहूँगा मैम कि एकजुट बिलीव करता है कि पहले छोटे स्तर पे रिसर्च करके चीज़ों को समझने की कोशिश की जाए और फिर उसको एडवोकेट किया जाए ताकि वो बड़े स्तर पर स्टेट और नेशनल लेवल तक जा सकें. तो डिफरेंट RCTs एकजुट ने किए हैं, छोटे स्टडीज़ किए हैं, और लगभग 2005 से ये चीज़ें शुरू हुई हैं. तो मैं कुछ स्टडीज़ को मेंशन करना चाहूँगा पैनल के बीच में, बिकॉज डिटेल प्रेजेंटेशन का स्कोप नहीं है, एज आई इन्फॉर्म्ड बाय द ऑर्गेनाइजर. 2005 to 8 में एकजुट ट्रायल जो न्यूनाटल मोर्टेलिटी को रिड्यूस करने के लिए इंट्रोड्यूस किया गया था इंटरवेंशन, उसमें महिला समूह के साथ काम करते हुए 3 साल में लगभग 30% का रिडक्शन न्यूनाटल मोर्टेलिटी में अचीव किया था मैम उस दौरान पे. उसमें जो एक मुद्दा था वो था कि एकजुट ने अपने तरीके से फैसिलिटेटर को सेलेक्ट किया था, उनको चुना था गाँव के बीच में. उसके बाद जब इसको पॉलिसी लेवल में जाने की बात होने के बारे में सोचा गया, तो फिर इसको वापस से एक और RCT के माध्यम से आशा वर्कर अंडर द NHM, सब लोग हम लोग जान रहे हैं, उनके साथ करके देखा गया. जोहार ट्रायल आप कभी भी एक्सेस से, ओपन एक्सेस से सर्च कर सकते हैं, झारखंड उड़ीसा हेल्थ एक्शन रिसर्च. तो हमारे नेबर स्टेट झारखंड और उड़ीसा के कुछ डिस्ट्रिक्ट्स के गाँवों में इसको किया गया, और सेम रिजल्ट मीन्स इट्स 1% मोर, 31% का रिडक्शन विद इन 2 years ऑफ इंटरवेंशन देखा गया था। उसके साथ साथ न्यूट्रिशन में केयरिंग ट्रायल के नाम से एक RCT की गई, और उसके साथ साथ बहुत छोटे छोटे और भी बहुत सारे स्टडीज़ हैं जिसमें ये देखा गया कि अगर महिलाओं को ध्यान में रखकर, जिनके साथ आप बात कर रहे हैं उनको ध्यान में रखकर उनको मौका दिया जाए कि वो अपनी बातों को रखें, वो चर्चा करें, वो ग्रुप में बैठें, और हेल्थ हो चाहे न्यूट्रिशन हो, विलेज स्पेसिफिक अपने आसपास अपने घरों से संबंधित बात को करने का उनको मौका मिले, तो ये चीज़ें अचीव की जा सकती हैं। जिस चीज़ को सोचकर पॉलिसी डिज़ाइन की जाती है, जिस चीज़ को सोचकर हम और आप बात कर रहे हैं कि प्रोग्राम्स को कैसे हम फील्ड तक लेके जाएं, अगर उसका डिज़ाइन में ये पार्ट रखा जाए कि कम्युनिटी में महिलाओं को उस विषय पे बात करने का मौका मिले, तो डाइटरी डाइवर्सिटी, फ्रीक्वेंसी, स्टंटिंग, वेस्टिंग, लगभग सारे इंडिकेटर्स जो हम बात करते हैं NFHS में हैं, उन सारे इंडिकेटर्स पे हमने बदलाव देखे हैं। इन्हीं सब चीज़ों को देखकर आज के समय में जब मैं यहाँ बात कर रहा हूँ, भारत सरकार के हेल्थ डिपार्टमेंट ने जो इस इनिशिएटिव है PLA को उन 10 स्टेट्स के लिए रिकमेंड भी किया जिन स्टेट्स में इन्फेंट मोर्टेलिटी की स्थिति थोड़ी खराब थी। तो उसमें से झारखंड में आज के समय में, मध्य प्रदेश में आशा प्रोग्राम में ये अप्रोच चल रहा है, जहाँ पर आशा कम्युनिटी में महिलाओं के साथ बैठकर एक ओवरऑल इशू है समुदाय के स्तर पे जो सरकार और हम चाहते हैं चेंज होना, लेकिन उन इश्यूज़ को कैसे छोटे छोटे स्तर पर ले जाके हर गांव के स्तर पे उस चर्चा को लाना एक स्किल है जो आशा को ट्रेनिंग के माध्यम से दी जा रही है, और उसके माध्यम से वो बदलाव लाने का प्रयास किया जा रहा है। झारखंड में ये अभी पूरे हर एक गाँव में, पूरे झारखंड के गाँव में किया जा रहा है, और इसमें भी एक स्टडी हुई थी, एक रिसर्च हुआ जिसमें यूनिवर्सिटी कॉलेज ऑफ लंदन इन्वॉल्व था, और अभी ये अंडर पब्लिकेशन अब स्टिल आई कैन कोट की उसमें भी लगभग 24% कमी देखी गई है न्यूनेटल मोर्टेलिटी में, जब इस प्रकार से आशा गांव स्तर पे बैठकर बात कर रही है। तो ऑफ कोर्स जब भी हम वुमेंस ग्रुप, होम विजिट्स और काउंसलिंग को इस तरीके से पार्टिसिपेटरी वे में लाने की कोशिश करेंगे, उसको डिज़ाइन करेंगे, उसके कॉन्टेक्स्ट में चेंज लाएंगे, तो रिजल्ट्स देखने को मिलते हैं। थैंक यू।
Thank you, Vikas ji. So, I have another round of questions prepared, but I think that it would be good if we have more discussions and more participation from the audience. So, I would request Vijayalakshmi ma'am to open the floor for questions. Harjot Kaur.
Query or a small question to the madam from Care India. You were talking about counseling and you were talking about the 3 initiatives of how counseling has been done. What I would like to know is that generally under counseling or under Domestic Violence Act, they are also called state protection officers. People are designated as such and they have the force of law with them. But if you're doing it in a different manner with the health department and others, then counseling without the force of law, how effective it is?
Thanks for asking the question, and I would like to clarify to the audience that if this is the message, then that was not intended at all. These are departments where the whole model is really to train and sensitize doctors, nurses at the hospital, improve the way documentation of domestic violence actually is taking place, because the domestic violence law mandates medical facilities to document every episode of violence and refer women to protection officers. This is what the law says. But the system is not following it. Doctors are not trained, sensitized. They think this is a private matter. हमको इसमें कुछ नहीं करना है. So this is not to replace. This is really coordinated effort to get women at an early stage, do that job and connect them to the protection officer for further thing. So the counseling is more of first line psychological support. It's really to tell them about safety planning, explain the consequences of living in abusive relationship, giving them information about law, telling them about helpline, about protection officer, about police stations, what are her rights, and enabling her to actually stop abuse in her life. So just to clarify that. So the focus is really to get the health system to do its job as far as violence against women is concerned. And ma'am, I want to take this opportunity to appeal to you, because you're the managing director. 2014, the Ministry of Health issued medico-legal guidelines for responding to sexual violence to stop all harmful practices and insensitivity in hospitals. Bihar government issued it in 2015, but sadly, madam, even today, those guidelines are not being followed. The proformas are not available in public hospitals. Survivors of rape across Bihar are suffering because they have to wait for long hours. Two-finger test continues to be done. Mandatory age estimation, even when there's documentary proof. So all kinds of violations continue. So I hope that, on this occasion, if you can actually, this group can do something about what is already existing. These are guidelines already issued in 2014. Kuch naya nahi karna hai. But those are not being implemented. So it's really to get the health system to stop its harmful practices and sensitively respond to violence against women.
In trying in WDC to actually bring various stakeholders, especially health department, to come forward and have a discussion not only on this particular issue, but so many other issues, pertinent issues like PCPNDT implementation, etc. But that could not happen. It's very difficult. But at the same time, WDC had taken this initiative long time back, like in 2015-16 itself. And in fact, we have funded, being a small organization with very little funding support, we have funded the State Health Society to train all the frontline health workers, ASHAs and ANMs in identifying, because they do door-to-door visits, they do antenatal checkups, etc. They visit women in the rural areas. So we have in fact funded State Health Society to train ASHAs and ANMs and frontline health workers to identify gender-based violence at households, and then give them initial counseling. So this we have done long time back in 15-16 itself, but that was one time effort from our side. But this has to be continuously done, either from WDC side, because WDC is the nodal organization for women-related issues, or the health department, because we have done once. So from there, they should take it forward and continuously do. Because the trainings and the capacity building exercise is a continuous effort. One should keep on doing it. So we have done that preliminary exercise, but maybe whatever you have mentioned, I am not the right person to comment on it. I do not know what is the present status. Similarly, we had rolled out another intervention again through WDC. Ma'am, you can just ask your staff also. So this was called as Gram Varta, Health, Nutrition, Water, Sanitation, communication strategy. It is not only a communication strategy, it is also a behavior change modification strategy. So it involved like most of the pregnant, lactating and nursing mothers, and it was done with a complete participatory approach, through role plays, and it was like, it also again contained lot of modules, and at least 20 modules were rolled out, and through participatory approach, women, they themselves were actually doing those role plays, and they did it so wonderfully. So we could actually get an international award for that Gram Varta intervention run by WDC. So ma'am, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are so many good islands of excellence kind of interventions which were there already in the environment. we have to sustain them. That is the key. We have to sustain them. We have to continuously engage with the community. If this has worked well, why don't we continue it? This kind of an approach would work better. I think, when it comes to gender and health, there are 2-3 important issues which all of us as policy makers at some level and policy implementers throughout our lives, and also when we are engaging with the wider society, the macro environment with the different stakeholders like UN organizations and organizations like Ekjut and Sehat and a lot of NGOs and also with public. So basically 2-3 things. One is creating institutional capacities. So that is very, very important. We have a lot of frontline workers in terms of ASHA, ANM and the health frontline workers, ICDS frontline workers, Jivika. Now we have a huge platform, like more than 1 crore women are engaged with Jivika today. So we have created that institutional capacity. What is now, the next step is train them continuously, hammer the point, continuously hammer the point, train them and train our own staff, our own, other workers who can actually, send such kind of messages, etc. So that is another important issue. The third important issue is one has to be strong on acts. What is that legislation, the piece of legislation, what it says, and whether we are actually, implementing it or not. For example, this PWDVA. We have been implementing PWDVA, we have trained a lot of them, but this has to sustain continuously because new people are coming, new stakeholders are coming in, and still there is so much of ground to cover. So we have to continuously, do the training and capacity building for both our staff, support staff, and also to the public, create public awareness. If we can do these 3-4 things in a systematic manner with a strategy, I think most of the issues can be sorted out. Thank you.